Hey folks, it's Andrew from Gemba Red, and today we're going to be talking about the Planet Fitness Total Body Enhancement Beauty Angel RVT30 Standing Red Light Therapy Fluorescent Tube Booth. Planet Fitness is a popular gym. It's got millions of members, and a lot of people are interested in this total body enhancement. That's their kind of branding. They're using what's known as a Beauty Angel brand booth, but then they kind of rebranded it as a total body enhancement thing. So it's got all these different names, but basically you go into the booth, you stand inside. It's got these fluorescent tubes that are red, and they give you supposedly red light therapy. So that was always a big question of like, what is it actually delivering? What's the intensity? What's the wavelengths? There's a lot of debate online, and some people are kind of curious of like, they see the bulbs and they're kind of curious about what color it is. Some people think it's white, some people say it's red. There's even this big debate about that. So my curiosity got the better of me, and I wanted to go inside and figure it out for myself. I took in some test equipment, the Hopo Color to do intensity and wavelengths and spectrum and flicker, and I also took in some devices to do EMFs. So I wanted to give like a little technical review. I also posted all of my testing on a separate video, so you can go through that, watch me do the testing in real time, so I can give you as much transparency as possible and show you, I wasn't trying to do any funny business. These are handheld test meters, so sometimes they're not as accurate as you could get like a laboratory grade or a benchtop grade test meter. So, I'm doing the best I can with the meters that I have. And obviously, full disclosure, I run my own red light therapy business. You could say I've got, some sort of competing interest with Planet Fitness, but, that would be kind of a vain thing for me to assume, because they've got millions of customers and I have like, maybe 10,000 customers. So there's not, I'm like an ant to them. So I don't see myself as like an adversarial aspect to to this, but you could. I see it more like I'm an ant and I'm picking up their scraps, and I want their product to be good, actually. I don't want to be trashing on everyone's products. Everyone thinks that. It's just, I unfortunately uncover some bad stuff whenever I try to measure other companies' products. It's, but the measure, the measurement's the measurement. So anyway, so I go in there and I want them to have a good product, because if you try it out, one of their millions of customers try it out, you're researching red light therapy online, you're researching Planet Fitness's, options and stuff, you're going to stumble across this red light therapy stuff. And then you'll Google search it, or you'll try it out at Planet Fitness. And if you have a good time, then you'll tell your friends and you'll say, hey, I tried out red light therapy at this booth at the gym and it was great. And then, you and your friends will eventually stumble across my products, maybe, and then you want something to use at your home. That's the important thing. I want these products to be good. I'll give you my opinions on them, and you could say my opinions are skewed, but ultimately, criticism's good, because it encourages companies to do better, to improve their products, and ultimately, if everyone's criticizing each other fairly, then the consumer benefits, right? We're going to do a quick review of my measurements, and I went to 3 different Planet Fitness booths, because I wanted to really test out if there's any variability between the different booths. So let's get started. We're going to go over, like I said, intensity, wavelengths. We're going to go over flicker, and we're going to go over EMFs. And again, I've tested all that out in this separate video I'm going to post just before this one, and so you can check that out yourself if you want to double check me, if you want to come up with your own interpretations of my measurements, and you can watch me do it in real time, make sure I'm not just making up numbers in this video. So the intensity, let's start. This is like the easiest one. Intensity, you take a measurement, it measures a certain, just from this sensor here. This is a spectroradiometer, so it measures all the wavelengths, and it tells you, the intensity of each wavelength. So that's a really good way to measure red light therapy, because a lot of times you're dealing with multiple wavelengths. So it's better than like a laser power meter that you have to guess what the wavelengths are and make correction factors. So anyway, I was getting some variable results, and you can see that when I was testing it. I was getting somewhere between 10 milliwatts per centimeter squared to 15 milliwatts per centimeter squared. Occasionally, I'd get a big spike up to about 80 or 90. So again, you can watch all those measurements. I took many measurements to, sometimes you repeat your measurement as an engineer. You keep repeating your measurement, and you understand the variability of the measurement. So for this review, we're going to say it's about 15 milliwatts per centimeter squared. So that, that's a pretty good amount of intensity, 15. Some people might say that's kind of low because most of the red light panels in this marketplace that I'm more of a direct competitor with, 15 seems low because most of my competitors say, oh, you need 100, you need 150, you need 107. Some of them have like 170 now. Those are ridiculous numbers. They're kind of false numbers because they're using solar power meters. So the general consumer isn't getting any of the right messaging. 15 is pretty good. It's in line with some of the full body light therapy trials. It's in line. It's a few points lower than I think like the Novo Thor, which is one of the gold standards of the industry. It's a few milliwatts per centimeter squared less than that. Supposedly, if we understand Thor's measurements properly. So 15 is good. And again, we're thinking about a product. If you had to treat millions of people, you don't know how their skin sensitivity is, if they've ever tried red light therapy before, if they can even tolerate being out in the sun. So 15 is a good, kind of reasonable amount that you would expose millions of people to without knowing their medical situation, right? So, you kind of need to tailor it to that. So 15 is not too bad. So then we get into some tricky stuff. We get into the wavelengths. This thing does the wavelengths. I'll maybe show some screenshots of the wavelengths next to me in this video. So the wavelength profile is a fluorescent spectrum. No other lighting technology makes such a weird spectrum with all these little random peaks all over the place. So it's a fluorescent tube, confirms it's definitely not LED. So it's a fluorescent tube, and it's fluorescing these wavelengths, and my human eye notices it's white. It's like a white color. Some of the videos I took, it looks more reddish, and that's how the camera's interpreting the color, and then your screen has to interpret those colors. So, but if your human eyes are looking at it, it looks very like a white-ish, especially once your eyes adjust to it. So, you can trust your eyes. I see a lot of people say, oh my gosh, is this thing white? And then other people say, no, it's red light therapy, so it's got to be red. I'm like, you got to trust your eyes, first of all. And so anyway, if you don't want to trust your eyes and trust a measurement, this thing confirms we've got some blue in there, we've got some green, and we got obviously red, and those three together give you that whitish hue. So it's got little bits of blue, little bits of green, and just enough that are leaking through, whatever fluorescing, molecules they used, that, all three of those together become kind of a whitish. It's still very heavily based in the red. So, it's like a reddish white, or, I was calling it pink in some of my videos, but there's really not even a good word to describe it. I think that's why so many people are confused. It's just a weird kind of color to look at and try to understand. It's this whitish red or pinkish, and, you don't know if you can trust your own eyes. So anyway, so I do confirm that. So we've got some blue and green leaking through. I don't think that's a good idea for red light therapy. But we've got mostly what my thing measured was, I think, about 620 nanometers. So that's a little bit shorter in the wavelength range. Usually we see 630 or we see 660. So it's a little bit shorter. Maybe it's a little bit more shallow penetration. It could do some good effects, but I think it's a little bit on the shorter side. Like I said, I think my handheld meter isn't always as super precise with the wavelengths. It could be off by a couple of nanometers, but it gives you a pretty good ballpark that it's probably around, the main peak there is about 620. Then we've got another peak around 700, and that's like right on the cusp of red to the near infrared is at 700. So it's like an mostly invisible wavelength, which, there's not a lot of studies about 700. So I'm not sure if that's just a random output from the fluorescent tube, or however they did it. Was it intentional to make 700, and for some reason they wanted a little bit of that longer wavelength near infrared? But I haven't seen any clinical reason why you want 700, but it's there, and that's part of the energy. That's part of the like I said, if it's about 15 milliwatts intensity, so some of it's most of it's that 620. Then you got the 700, and then you've got like some of that blue and green leaking through, and that all adds together, and that makes your 15. So that's the wavelengths, and that explains. I want to validate to people, if you think you're seeing white, it's white. You know what I mean? So a lot of times we start to not trust our own senses, and we just trust marketing materials or what other people say on social media. Trust your own instincts. It's a white. So anyway, so we did intensity, wavelengths. Now we'll talk about flicker. And flicker is an on-off modulation of the light. It happens so fast that most of the time it's invisible to your eye, because it's happening usually twice the AC current. So in the US, it's usually 120 hertz. Most lights are flickering 120 hertz. If you have a good LED driver, you can really flatten out that and have practically no flicker. Some of the original fluorescent tubes that were installed in workplaces and offices and things like that, people complained about migraines and headaches, and you can even get eye strain. You can even get neck strain, because your neck is trying to tense up because your brain is trying to force your head to stay still to compensate for the flickering light. So you get stroboscopic effects. So if you move really fast, or if you've got rotating machinery, then you creates that phantom imagery of the strobe light kind of effect, the stroboscopic effect. There are standards for safety of flicker. This is one of the most kind of scientifically validated things that a lot of people kind of don't really know about. They don't really think about. They don't really think it's a problem. And there's a lot of standards. There's a lot of work has been done in the lighting industry to reduce flicker in computer monitors, reduce flicker in toys. So it can be a problem, and if you're really health minded, you're trying to avoid flicker. And this flicker from these fluorescent tubes, which again were historically one of the first things people noticed when they switched over office lighting to fluorescent tubes, they had too much flicker and caused people problems. This Planet Fitness Total Body Enhancement has a lot of flicker. The flicker percent, according to my Hopo color, was about 50%. According to my Radix Lupin, was about 40%. Those are very high percentages. The IEEE, I forgot the acronym. The IEEE defined that if you're at 120 hertz, which it is, if you're at 120 hertz, if you're above 10% flicker, they categorize that as high risk. So again, it's not my definition. I'm not trying to fearmonger you. This was defined, I think, in like 2010. This is old news. It's very well studied. You can find it on PubMed. You can find institutions like the IEEE have set these standards. So if you're above 10%, that's called high risk. I would say if you're a person that is never affected by flicker and you don't care about flicker, I'd say even 20%, higher than 20%, you'll start to notice some weird stuff going on. And if you look at an old fluorescent tube, if you go to an old workshop or a basement or whatever, and you can see the flickering happening closer to the ends of the tube, I'm not sure why that happens, but I was seeing it that in at least one of the machines I was testing, I could see the flicker originating in the upper end of the tube. So it's a lot of flicker. It's unmitigated, even with like I said, the lighting in the offices. They started to mitigate that flicker either by increasing the hertz, by using higher frequency ballasts, or you can try to buffer out that waveform. So I think I wouldn't. I'm not into that. So that's my opinion. And these are my measurements that You could question if things are calibrated correctly. But to me, it just seems like a completely unmitigated flicker disaster. So I just would not be into that. And again, we've got blue light, like I said, some blue light creeping through. You got some flicker. This is not a great situation for the eyes and for the brain to be coping with all that. So anyway, again, you can try it out. I would say I tried wearing blue blocker glasses one of the times I was in there. At least that cuts out the blue, and then that helps, maybe buffer out some of that modulation that gets into your eyes. If you have flicker or pulsing and you've got a laser or a small cluster, diode product that's right on your skin, then obviously that's not going to bother your eyes and your brain. It's only when you're engulfing your whole body and it's taking up your whole field of vision. Again, this was well defined. I'm not making this up. It's taking up your whole field of vision. That's when it becomes a problem. If you're a kid and you're watching an episode of Pokemon and you're staring right in front of the TV screen, that's taking up your whole field of vision. And there was a big incident in the 90s that an episode caused seizures and all kinds of events. So you can look that up in Japan. In the 90s, episode of Pokemon caused that event, and that's what started a lot of the studies on flicker and the regulations on flicker. So it's an interesting topic for me. It doesn't get a lot of limelight. And again, if we get like a really gross example of flicker, then you got to really think about, even if you don't care about flicker, sometimes you're like, okay, there's a line that everyone needs to draw. So anyway, so we talked about flicker a lot. And we're going to talk about EMFs. So EMFs, I've got a magnetic field meter, the milligauss meter, and then I did electric fields on another meter. So the magnetic field is usually one of the top things that most companies are referring to when they say they have a low EMF product. They're mostly just talking about the magnetic field. And, you want that to be, you want it to be as low as possible. In nature, there's not much of a magnetic field other than kind of from the earth and things like that. So, we're trying to simulate nature. We're trying to get beneficial wavelengths from red light that comes from the sun and things like that. And maybe you're more open-minded to saying, well, there's certain frequencies on the electromagnetic spectrum. They're not ionizing, but they can still affect the body. If you're starting to be more open-minded that light can help your body, or too much light can hurt your body, then maybe too much of certain types of EMFs can affect people. And some people do feel like they experience acute symptoms from EMF exposure, like elevated heart rate, dizziness, nausea, general anxiety. It could exacerbate mood disorders. So, a lot of people are looking out for that. So I'm taking the measurements. If, again, if you're not into flicker or EMF, then, you might have already left already. So milligauss, if you're standing right in the middle, it's got these kind of three sections. I measured, I think, about 30 milligauss, which, again, comparatively to like a LED panel, that's pretty high. Because most of the LED panels, they tell you, hey, if you're at least 6 inches away, that milligauss is going to be negligible. And by negligible, usually that means like less than 1 milligauss. So most of the LED panels, from good brands, are usually less than 1 milligauss if you're 6 inches away. I've got panels that are very low milligauss, even up close. So you can really mitigate it. So you're getting 30, and it's almost like you got to think about red light therapy dosing. If you're engulfing your whole body in 30 milligauss, there's milligauss coming from all there's kind of 3 panels. It's coming from all around you. That's part of your dose too. If you've got maybe a small handheld device that's got a fan on it, with some milligauss, again, then you're only affecting that localized area. But then if you've got a giant full body pod or tube, then you're engulfing your whole body. So, you got to think about that. There's a dosing thing. Again, there's not clear definitions of what you want to do or don't want to do. It's kind of like asking someone, oh, how many candy bars can I eat before I get diabetes? And it's like, how much sugar can you eat before you get diabetes? It's kind of like how much milligauss can I be affected by before I get, some weird problems. Maybe it's carcinogenic. So, it's like asking that kind of question. You don't know. It has to do with repeated exposure, or your other antioxidants in your life, your fitness, and things like that too. So there's all these factors. Again, it's death by 1,000 cuts. If you can reduce your EMFs and things like that, then overall, things start to come together. So then we got electric field. Again, it's a different type of extremely low frequency field. And that was pretty high too. I think that was around 300 volts per meter. Again, if you're even if you're standing in the center and you do have a few inches from each of the panels. So, that's pretty big EMF situation that you're surrounding yourself in. And that begs the question of if I get into, we covered all the measurements. And now if we get into what's the effectiveness, and the intensity is pretty good. Wavelengths are okay. You might, you've got enough of the right wavelengths to maybe get some beneficial effect. But then you've got blue light, you've got flicker, you've got EMFs. If you there's a vibration machine underneath. I'm not even going to go into that. But then you've got the vibration machine, you've got fans overhead. They even give you handlebars to hold on to, so you maybe while you're wobbling on the vibration plate. So what's the real effect going on? And they did have, some disclaimers and some disclosures. It's not consistent within all of the different locations that I went to. Some of them don't mention wearing eye protection. One of them did mention I should wear eye protection, and they kind of indicated that I should have brought my own, which I had my blue blockers with me. And so I went in with my blue blockers. So so there's kind of inconsistent instructions from different locations. So I think they should kind of figure that out. At least they should have a consistent messaging for all their locations to say, hey, you should or shouldn't wear goggles. It would be weird if I went to one location for multiple years and then I go to another location and they're like, oh, you should be really wearing goggles. And you're like, wait, I was going for many years to another location and they didn't mention anything about goggles. So you would be kind of shocked by that. Even if there's no harm, you'd be kind of shocked by that. But again, I would definitely wear goggles, at least, like I said, blue blockers to block that blue light. Red light, especially this relatively low intensity, I would think is not a problem for the eyes. But again, it's going to seem very bright, especially if you've never used it before, so you might want some protection. Not really protection, just to feel more comfortable so you're not, feeling uncomfortable and getting overwhelmed. So eye protection is one thing. And again, there's some, they have different websites. I don't know if they're official reviews or not. They do mention some possible contraindications or side effects like dizziness or fatigue or other issues. And that kind of begs the question for me, is it really the red light that's causing those problems, or is it all those other things? Like I said, flicker can cause dizziness, EMFs can cause dizziness, blue light can cause some eye strain. So, there's well, what's really happening in there? I feel like there's more effects from the other stuff than there is from the red light. So that's why, unfortunately, I would say this is not a very good representation of what the current red light therapy market has to offer in terms of having the right wavelengths, like 660, 850, a lot of different wavelengths in between. And then there's, having the good intensity, especially if you're doing non-contact treatment. You might want to be closer to 20 or 30 milliwatts per centimeter squared for non-contact treatment. You could always start lower and then work your way up. So I'd say if you're looking for like a clinic to try out red light therapy, I'd say try to find somewhere else, so you get a better representation. Again, the worst thing for me is that someone tries out the Planet Fitness thing and then they say, oh, I didn't feel any effects or I didn't really like it. And then they tell their friends and they say, oh yeah, that red light therapy stuff is no good. So I want the Planet Fitness to hopefully upgrade their tubes. Maybe they can do LED retrofit tubes and get those right wavelengths, and they could, redo the ballasts or the drivers and reduce the flicker. And a lot of times if you get newer ballasts and drivers, they're better on EMFs, because there are standards on, like, especially radio frequency, but some of the newer drivers are pretty good, and you can add a little bit of shielding to them. So, it's some incentives for them to upgrade their equipment, offer better stuff to people, and then they have a better business in the long run, and then I have better business in the long run because people are enjoying it, and then they might want something to take home, and they search and they find me. So again, it's all, how you frame it, of like, oh, he's just trying to bash on them. I can't really control the measurements. I wish, they were better from my perspective. Maybe you don't mind it. There's PEMF, pulse electromagnetic frequencies, that do show some beneficial effects. So again, if you do it right, and some people, the people selling high flicker products will say, oh, well, flicker's kind of like pulsing, so you get benefits from that, which is just a garbage statement. But if you want to go that way and give opportunity to say, well, there's some backdoor benefits to it, but again, those aren't really well studied, and you'd have to really know what you're doing to play around with. PEMF is a different field, and pulsing adds a different layer of understanding. So anyway, so there's a lot of opportunities to improvement. I always see that in my own products and my own things I'm doing, how I'm testing things, and the information I provide. Hopefully you can take this information. If you try out Planet Fitness, let us know how it went. I tried it out. Again, I didn't, you don't drop dead from some EMFs the first time you get it. So I tried it a couple times. I tested it out. I'm still all right. So it's not, and when I was wearing my blue blockers, it felt like a normal session of red light therapy to me. So there's nothing dramatically wrong with it, but I would say if you want something like what I would consider more like the real deal, find a different clinic that you can try out full body red light therapy. There's more and more clinics popping up all over the place, so you can look up for local health clinics. Some gyms might offer some panels and stuff where you stand in front of, or again, obviously shop online and find a panel online. So anyway, hopefully this helps. This satisfied a lot of curiosity for me. Hopefully it satisfies curiosity for you, and hopefully this is an amicable kind of representation of what Planet Fitness offers, and gives them some opportunity to improve. Planet Fitness can do their own research into my measurements. They can take their own measurements, and they can address any concerns that I have, either by upgrading it or saying, hey, we tested ourselves, Andrew used some crap stuff, and he's just trying to represent them bad. But obviously I had the best intentions, and the best equipment that I can find, and just sharing my thoughts. So thanks for tuning in.